The Arctic. Um, a realm of unforgiving beauty,
Yeah.
shrouded in mystery. And for nearly 40 years, it held captive a very real ghost ship, the SS Baychimo.
You've likely heard tales of ghost ships. But this isn't just some maritime legend. The Baychimo's story is one of incredible resilience, unexpected twists, and a healthy dose of the eerie.
So before we get to the ghost ship part, set the scene for us. What was the Baychimo and what was it doing up there in the Arctic in the first place?
The Baychimo was a sturdy steel cargo steamer, built in Sweden in 1914. It wasn't flashy, but it was built for a tough job, supplying essential goods to the remote Inuit communities scattered along the Canadian Arctic coast.
Okay, so imagine a floating general store, braving some of the harshest conditions on Earth, and playing a vital role in the lives of those communities.
Precisely. For almost 2 decades, the Baychimo, under the ownership of the Hudson's Bay Company, was a lifeline for these communities, delivering everything from food and fuel to building materials and manufactured goods.
And this is where our story takes its first turn toward the extraordinary. It's 1931, and the Baychimo is on what should have been a routine voyage when it encounters the Arctic's most formidable obstacle.
Pack ice. It's not just frozen water, you see. It's a dynamic, powerful force, constantly shifting and grinding. Imagine immense floes, some the size of small cities, capable of crushing a ship's hull with unimaginable pressure.
So becoming trapped in the ice wasn't entirely unheard of for ships navigating those waters.
It was a calculated risk. Sometimes ships would become beset for days, even weeks, waiting for the ice to shift or for a change in currents.
And that's exactly what happened to the Baychimo.
Indeed. On this particular voyage, the Baychimo became trapped. The crew, experienced Arctic sailors, decided to seek refuge in Barrow, Alaska, the northernmost town in the U.S., while they waited for the ice to release their ship.
It must have been a strange sort of limbo, trapped, but not lost. What was life like in Barrow for those sailors, so far from home?
Barrow, even today, is a remote outpost with a stark beauty. Back then, it would have been even more isolated. The crew likely would have relied on the hospitality of the local Inupiat people, sharing stories and perhaps even anxieties about the fate of their ship and the coming winter.
And eventually the ice did relent, at least for a little while.
It did. The Baychimo broke free, and the crew, relieved to be reunited with their vessel, set off again, hoping to salvage what was left of their trading season. Little did they know their encounter with the Arctic ice was far from over.
The Arctic had other plans, it seems, and that's where we'll pick up the story when we return.
Yeah, the Arctic is, well, she doesn't give up so easily. Just when you think you've outsmarted her, she lets you know who's really in control. And for the crew of the Baychimo, well, that reminder came swiftly and brutally.
So the ice wasn't done with them just yet. I'm guessing their relief was pretty short-lived.
To put it mildly, the ship encountered another ice floe, much larger this time. They were trapped, again, at the mercy of the shifting ice and the rapidly approaching Arctic winter.
I've heard stories about Arctic winters, the relentless cold, the howling winds. What must have been going through the minds of those sailors as they realized how serious their situation was?
Fear, certainly, but also a steely resolve born from years of experience in those unforgiving waters. They knew they were in a fight for their lives. Evacuation wasn't a matter of convenience this time. It was a necessity.
So they abandoned ship.
Well, not entirely. They made the difficult decision to partially evacuate. 22 crew members were airlifted to safety, leaving 15 behind to brave the elements and safeguard the ship. They hoped that when the warmer months arrived, they might still be able to salvage the Baychimo and its precious cargo.
15 men alone on a ship locked in by the Arctic winter. It's a scene almost impossible to imagine, even with all our modern comforts.
And as if the isolation and the cold weren't enough, a ferocious blizzard swept in, battering the Baychimo with hurricane-force winds and blinding snow. When the storm finally subsided, the men emerged from their shelter to find, well, nothing.
The ship had vanished.
Swallowed whole by the blinding whiteness, the men assumed the worst, that the Baychimo had been crushed by the ice or swept out to sea, lost forever beneath the frozen waves.
And just like that, the story could have ended. Another ship claimed by the Arctic. But the Baychimo, it seems, had other plans.
Indeed, because a few days later, an Inuit hunter approached the stranded crew with astonishing news.
He'd seen the Baychimo.
Alive and well, or at least as well as a ship adrift in the Arctic could be. It was spotted miles from its last known position, seemingly undamaged, sailing serenely, as if guided by an unseen hand.
It's like something out of a ghost story. They must have thought they were going mad.
You have to remember, the Arctic can play tricks on the mind. But this was no hallucination. The crew, led by the hunter, set out and found their wayward ship bobbing gently in the vast expanse of ice and water. Hope, tinged with disbelief, must have surged through them.
So they climbed aboard, fired up the engines, and sailed back home to a chorus of cheers, right? The stuff of legends. But knowing this story, I suspect it wasn't quite that simple.
The Arctic is rarely so accommodating. While the ship had miraculously survived the storm, it was still trapped, and the winter was closing in fast. Salvaging the Baychimo was deemed too risky.
So they abandoned it. Again.
This time, for good. They stripped the Baychap of its most valuable cargo, a fortune in furs, and left the ship to its fate, a ghost ship in the making. Little did they know that this decision would spark decades of mystery and inspire countless tales of the Arctic's most enduring enigma.
The ghost ship of the Arctic. And we'll delve deeper into those tales when we return. So the Baychimo is adrift. Abandoned, yeah, but definitely not forgotten. What happened next? Did this ghost ship just fade into obscurity, or did the Arctic have other plans?
The Arctic, as we've learned, loves to weave a good mystery.
Mm.
And the Baychimo, now free from the constraints of human purpose, became a phantom protagonist in a story that would span decades.
And this is where the sightings begin. Not just, fleeting glimpses or whispers of a ghostly presence, but we're talking documented encounters from seasoned sailors, Arctic explorers, even a renowned author. This wasn't just local folklore. People were seeing this ship with their own eyes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
One of the most, evocative accounts comes from 1933, just a couple of years after the Baychimo was abandoned. Isabel Wiley Hutchison, a Scottish botanist and travel writer, known for her daring Arctic expeditions. She stumbled upon the ship during her travels.
Wait, hold on. She actually boarded the Baychimo. What was she thinking?
Hutchison, like many explorers drawn to the Arctic, possessed a potent mix of curiosity and courage. She described the experience of boarding the deserted Baychimo as uncanny, noting that the ship seemed eerily untouched despite its years adrift in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Her account, which she published in her travelogues, only added to the mystique of the Baychimo.
And the sightings continued. You mentioned that even the Inuit people, who knew those waters better than anyone, had encounters with this ghost ship. What was their perspective on this seemingly unsinkable vessel?
For the Inuit, the Arctic has always been a place of both profound respect and, and practical necessity. Their encounter with the Baychimo in 1933, where a group seeking shelter from a storm found themselves trapped aboard for 10 days. Well, it reveals this duality beautifully. They saw the ship as both a resource, a source of shelter, and perhaps even salvageable materials, and a manifestation of the Arctic's unpredictable nature.
It's almost as if the Baychimo transcended its identity as just a ship, becoming a sort of floating symbol of the Arctic itself, enduring, enigmatic, and ultimately unconquerable.
A fitting description. Over the years, there were numerous attempts to salvage the Baychimo, to capture this ghost ship and claim its secrets. Some were driven by profit, hoping to recover any valuable cargo that might remain. Others, I suspect, were drawn by the allure of the mystery, the challenge of conquering what seemed unconquerable.
But the Arctic, as we've learned, doesn't give up its treasures easily.
Indeed. Storms would appear out of nowhere, ice floes would shift, blocking access or threatening any ship that dared to get too close. The very environment that had birthed the legend of the Baychimo seemed determined to protect it.
So what was the Baychimo's final curtain call? Did anyone ever hear from this ghost ship again?
The last confirmed sighting was in 1969, nearly 40 years after the Baychimo was first claimed by the ice. A group of Inuit hunters reported seeing it, frozen solid in an ice pack, much as it had been all those years ago. And then, silence. The Baychimo vanished once more. This time, it seems, for good.
Lost to the mists of time and legend. It's almost too perfect an ending, wouldn't you say? No wreckage, no answers, just the enduring mystery of a ship that refused to die.
It's a reminder that some stories are meant to remain untold. Their endings left to our imaginations. The Baychimo, in its silence, speaks volumes about the enduring power of mystery, the allure of the unknown, and the humbling vastness of the natural world.
And perhaps, somewhere out there, beneath the shimmering aurora borealis or locked in the embrace of an ancient glacier, the Baychimo endures. A silent sentinel of the Arctic, its timbers whispering tales of resilience, adventure, and the enduring mystery of the sea. Thanks for listening.